Oh my gosh. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Steph.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I'm honored for you to join me today on my podcast because thanks to you and Ginny, you started this helped me get started on finding direction and finding a path to creating my platform. And I feel like I actually had waited a while to ask you to come on. Um, One, just like, oh, what would we talk about? But then I woke up one morning and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to ask Michelle to come on. And I've been listening to you. Actually, it was funny because I was in your class, in our podcast class, and it hit me that I had been listening to, I don't know why, but it had hit me in one of our classes, like midway through, that I had been listening to your podcast all along. And it was actually when I brought it up about your ayahuasca journey that I was like, oh, I had listened to your podcast that actually helped me decide to go on that avenue as well for myself. And then I think I even messaged you after that, and it actually didn't work out for me to go to Rhythmia, which is where you had went because of COVID, and then I went different directions. But I just thought that was like, it's kind of always so fascinating how the connections are. And then I got introduced to you through Ashley, one of our mutual friends, who I adore. And listening to your podcast as of lately, like we were talking before, this awakening that you've been going through, that's been really profound. And I was saying, like, I could just notice the shifts. And like I said, I had listened to you when you were going what I thought was an awakening back. I think, when did you go to Rhythmia? And
It was November of 2019. And
right.
that was an awakening, but we get them in layers.
Yeah, exactly. There's always like more layers
Mhm.
and
Always
depth.
more
Yeah.
shedding. That's what
Never ending.
awakening actually
Yeah.
means.
Yeah. And I've been listening to you, especially through COVID, and just hearing and like watching you on Instagram and just seeing you transform like my eyes. And it's like a budding flower. It's so beautiful. And like, yeah, like you like, there's a freedom, and I can totally just feel that from you. And I would love to talk about, and I know that's over many years, but I'd love to start talking about that journey for you because I think it's happening to a lot of people right now, and it's an exhilarating, exciting time, but yet also can be scary, confronting, and unfreaking comfortable. And I'm kind of in it right now myself. Like this week has been very confronting to me, and just being with it and breathing through it. And like before we started, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous to have this talk, just because I've just been kind of in it all week myself. So like, let's start back before this journey, because what were you doing? You were an actress, correct?
I was in TV retail hosting. Yeah, so TV retail hosting for 10 years, which was a massive bucket list dream from when I was like 5 years old. I always wanted to get
Oh,
on a show
interesting.
called Extra.
Uh-huh.
Extra had been around for like, it's now been around for almost 40 years. And so, when I was little, that was like the be all end all. And then I finally got that dream and I was on that show for 4 years. But it was also in that same time frame where I went to my first Tony Robbins event.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my first date with destiny that he does like once a
Okay.
year. And then I had one goal in mind when I went there, and it was, Tony, we didn't actually have a conversation, but this was like in my mind, help me figure out how to turn my, part-time gig on Extra to like a full-time, hosting role. And by day 5 of Date with Destiny, I literally dropped to my knees. This was another awakening. We always get them in different
Yeah.
layers. And I just heard a little voice said, being on TV was your little girl dream. That's how
Mm.
you would know that you made it, you mattered, and you were worthy. And you're beyond that now. And so it's time for you to help wake others up to their own self-worth, something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? This was like a
Mm-hmm.
shock with me. Hey, but it's called Date with Destiny for a reason.
Right.
That was no longer my destiny path. I was still on extra for 3 more years after that because it was a 1 day a week gig. And so the beautiful gift and synchro destiny in that
Mm-hmm.
is that it allowed me spaciousness to begin to create programs and containers to help awaken people
Mm.
to their self-esteem or to their self-worth and to
Oh,
really
it's interesting.
get after their impact. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering how you actually made that shift
Yeah.
from being on extra to then going and being a transformational coach.
Yeah,
Okay.
it happened in Tony Robbins' rooms. There was a couple years there where I went to, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 11 of his live events, and I was just really in it. And he really does help to ignite the leader in you. And
Mm-hmm.
then some of us kind of evolve past that. Like my work now has turned to a place where I want to like really learn and grow from the archangels and Mother
Right.
Nature. And it's
Yeah.
a very different season of my life, but I will be forever grateful for that season. But so then I went to Rhythmia in 2019 at the end of that year. And that for me was the first opportunity for me to see how hard it was to meet my fear. Because even as I was traveling from California to Costa Rica, which is where Rhythmia is, I sat on the flight the whole way there and the shuttle from, the Costa Rica airport to the Rhythmia, center. I'm not doing it. I was there just to support
Oh,
my mom,
that's
you
right.
know, and
Yeah.
I was terrified to try plant medicine.
Yeah.
And now I can look back and I can realize why, like, that makes sense. It's like I had just learned to master my mindset in Tony Robbins' rooms, and now you're
Mm-hmm.
asking me to let go of the mind, the
Mm-hmm.
ego, like the conscious perspective, and to go into the realm of the superconscious divinity,
Mm-hmm.
world. And so that was deeply cathartic and healing and beautiful. And then COVID hit, and my business
Can
just,
I ask you a question on
yeah,
that? So, what
yeah.
was it when you were there at Rhythmia that, so you were just going to go support your mom, and your mom is how old?
She's now almost 75. At that point, she was what, 72, 73? Yeah.
And she was going to do plant medicine?
Well, for her, Rhythmia, from the moment they had opened their doors, maybe 2, 3 years prior to 2019, that was at the top of her bucket list. And I had a very fast growing coaching and training business. So I was flushing cash. And I was like, Mom, let me make your dream come true. So I got to take her on her dream trip. And I mean, it was a magical experience to share with my mom. But yeah,
Yeah.
my mom wanted to go to
Yeah.
Rhythmia and try plant
I love
medicine.
that. So what was it in that trip that you saw, or what did you see that like had you then partake in it for yourself?
Well, it's kind of interesting because here I had paid for it, which was like what,
Mm-hmm.
5K plus a
I
ticket,
know.
everything
Yeah.
else. Right? It's not like it's cheap. Well, it's all relative, but that was
Yeah.
a sizable investment times two at that time. And so here I've flown all the way there, booked the time off, have paid for it, and I'm still trying to tell myself I'm not doing it. So that's when I was really beginning to meet myself on the surface level and all of the programming and conditioning of fear and panic and anxiety that was running me. And there was this guy there that's still there. He runs their business development. His name is John Jacob. And I knew him from LA, from my church in LA, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, John Jacob, what are you doing here? It was so
Yeah.
destined because he was with us from the flight to the compound. So in the shuttle, and the shuttle was a good hour. And he said, Well, what are you so afraid of? And I'm like, I'm afraid of seeing tarantulas. I'm afraid of seeing snakes. And I was just afraid, right, of the fear stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just kind of smiling and nodding because I think he knew that anything you're afraid of, you're going to see. And
Yeah.
he didn't say that because he knew
Yeah.
better. And he just said, But just know this, whatever you see, you're going to transform. You will no longer be
Exactly.
afraid of whatever it is that you're so afraid of. And you'll get through the first layers of density that are just in the conscious mind. It's not the truth of your life or reality or what's possible. And then once you get through that, Michelle, you're going to be in the oneness. And there was just something about the way he said it, but I still wasn't going. So it was the
Mm-hmm.
next morning because we'd come in very late that night. And the next day, I go to the orientation and I'm still not going. My mom's walking up to the Maloka and all the other people are walking to the Maloka. And I'm just watching all of them go. And I'm like, why are they all going? Like, is anybody like me just scared to death? Like I'm going to die in there?
Yeah.
so riddled by fear. And John Jacob, because God is so good, comes walking out of his bungalow when no one else is on the land. They're all up in the Maloka. The ceremony's going to start in about 15 minutes. And I happen to come out to just, I don't even know why I was out there. I guess maybe like it was just meant to be. I was just out of my room
Yeah.
looking at the sky. And he's like, "Hey, love, are you heading to the Maloka?" I'm like, "I'm too scared." And he just held my hands and he prayed with me. And Rhythmia is not like a religious place by any means, but because we knew each other in the context of our church known as Agape in LA, there was something about that. And he was like, "I am right here. I am 100 feet away." He's like, "If you need anything, you just call, you just come get me." As if you can do that on the plant medicine, but it was
Yeah.
enough for me. It was such a God wink. And I was just like, okay, I can do this. I can go in. And, there's that story. So
Yeah.
I feel like I was supported and guided. But the reality is that if someone's considering it and they've got a lot of fear, if you're considering it, you've already been called. If you're not considering it, you haven't been called. And even though I was there and I wasn't really considering it, so this could seem like a contradiction, I still went. So on some level, I knew I was being called.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
And
I
when
said
I,
yes.
yeah, and when I hear it too, like, I mean, I'm always like, there's no, there's no accidents, right? Like, there's no accidents that you were standing out there. And it's like, I know for me, every time I go, and I have not shared this part of my life yet on my podcast. So thank you so much for being that opening for me. But I know it literally feels like I am going to die. And I think it is because you're going and having like an ego death every time, right? That's like your ego is screaming. But I know for me, it was like when I actually heard your podcast and your pod, do you know what episode? Because you go into very vivid detail of it, which is really amazing because when I do them, I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm like, stop trying to analyze like what happened or like because I know I'm like I don't want to forget this is really like valuable information. I hope I don't forget it, so I'm like holding on so bad when I'm in my journey. But I've learned to just like trust the process, let go, and I don't need to try to remember everything. But I think it's so phenomenal that like you can remember every detail. So I don't know if what episode is that
I don't
in.
remember the number. I know that it was in November of 2019. I think there were 3 episodes because I brought on each of the 2 co-founders
Yeah.
right when I returned, Dr. Jeff McNary and then Jerry Powell.
Yeah.
And then I came on and I shared details of my 4 nights of journeying. The thing about me is I have a photographic memory. It's insane how accurate it is. And so if you take a photographic memory skill and you combine that with an emotional imprint, I mean, I just remembered visceral details.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it was.
yeah, and I recently journeyed again, maybe 2.5 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I also shared very visceral details. But this journey, 2-ish later years later, the medicine was very different with me. And this is what's so beautiful when we're on the trajectory of growth and expansion of our soul, is like this was so gentle. It was so sweet and loving. And it's like the nuances that were showing up literally showed up in the form of pink rose petals that would
Yeah.
just come and scoop up an insight
Yeah.
and bring it into my heart. And I was like, wow. Versus at Rhythmia, when I was journeying and so full of fear and panic and anxiety that I didn't fully know, it showed up very intense. It was violent. It was barbaric. Now, they say that you get what you need, right? Because, like, my mother
Yeah.
went 4 nights in a row that same week that I was there, and she just laid there in oneness with like a purple sacred geometry sky. Like,
Yeah.
what? But
All
that
four
was
nights.
all 4 nights. That's all she
Yeah.
got. So
Was
this
she frustrated by that?
was a teeny bit
Yeah.
frustrated, yeah, because she was like, "Hello, I want to see something crazy and wild," and
Yeah.
but she was going through a divorce, and it was
Mm.
tough, and she was feeling a little, like, I don't know, I don't want to put words into her mouth, but I think it was a
Yeah,
gift for her to
totally.
be given so much love and just serenity. Everything's gonna
Yeah.
be.
And I think that's like really profound too, because it's like where you're at in that moment. Because I know, like for me, my last one, I was like, please just, Mama Gaia, like please be gentle with me. Like I'm done with being like super traumatic and trauma and dealing with the trauma, that I'm like, I just need it to be gentle. And it was like a sweet,
Mm,
tender, like doing the healing and the stuff that I needed to do, but in a very like loving and like tender way versus the intensity, like let's do this work, you know what I mean? So and I don't know if that's part of like on a grander level of like the collective of where we are
mm.
now to
Good
like
point.
the collective.
Good point. Although in my most recent ceremony, there were only 8 participants and 3 facilitators, and it was a Shipibo tradition and style. So we were in pure blackness and no sound, and
That's
it was
amazing.
incredible. It was
Was
incredible.
it?
Oh my God. Yeah, because while they say no music and no light, like there was still like some sort of like a candle or the light of a pipe from our
Mm-hmm.
facilitator who spends half the year with his maestro in the Peruvian jungle. I mean, he's as legit as they come, and and then they would sing what's called icaros, which are
Yeah.
Peruvian Shipibo prayers, and that's how they cleanse you. And because it's such a small, intimate container, they do thorough intake. So they know all the stuff that you are working through, that you want to release, that you want to draw in. And so he's singing and praying and cleansing and clearing to the point where, like, literally for like 20 or 30 minutes to each person all night.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you feel like you have been excavated. And then you get the beautiful benefit of the collective. But what I was going to say is they're all the people that gathered for that particular ceremony back in early April of this year, we were all awake. And I know that you are as well, just fully awake to the worst case scenario, but yet wholly alive, just living
Mm-hmm.
life. And but some of them had really brutal journeys, really, really brutal journeys. But it was to free them from ancestral ties, karmic ties, anything that couldn't allow them to be in their full liberated power in this moment. And so, I don't know if I'll do it again. I'm sure I will. I've
Mm-hmm.
now done it 6 times. How many times have you done it?
I've done it two different ceremonies, each like two different nights, so like 4 times
Yeah,
total. But I've
yeah.
also used other medicines too that throughout the time. So I have found other like medicines that I also really like too. That um,
As examples.
I actually I have a facilitator in LA area that he uses like a combination of different like two different medicines together. It's like a DMT and then an MDMA like substance, which is probably my favorite because it's a heart opener,
Mm.
and it's a new thing that and he's always like, look, I don't know if it's like, I feel like I'm always like game for anything. I'm like, yeah, let's do it, So it's I just really love the work that I do with him, and it's been really profound. I mean, all of it, because I feel like each time builds on the last time for me. And
Mhm.
it's like been like, and actually even I get like the message that like, oh, we're just continuing on from the last time. And for whatever reason, for me, like that's where I do my work. Like I do my work in between, and I'm always I do a lot of other like personal development work too in between my sessions, but that's like, you know how it is. It's like you get a lot and then you have to like kind of break it down
You have to
to do
integrate
the
it.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if the work that you're doing in LA is, I did something similar back in August of last year. They called it heart opener
Mhm.
medicine, and they were capsules. And it was also a small group of us for a weekend, and
Oh.
it was profound. And
Was
that
it in
was,
Malibu?
no, we were in
No.
Santa
Okay.
Monica, but the guy who runs it all, he's got facilitators all over the nation.
Okay.
And okay.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and that was the beginning of my true awakening. Like that was where like I left Santa Monica and it was bananas time. But I am curious about your plant medicine journeys. Like, what would you say were some of the takeaways for you?
Um, for me, for my plant medicine journeys, I my biggest one has been healing sexual trauma. Has
Mm-hmm.
been my biggest my biggest one that I've been working through. So, um, I started like getting blips of things that started happening, and then I started seeing like a trend,
Mm-hmm.
and then that was when I kind of put it all together, and I found I and like what's interesting is I something came to me that something happened to me at a young age, and I didn't get really like graphic, like just I got the knowing that something had happened. And but it was interesting because I it kind of took me back from like the latest incident, and then like kind of took me back through series that I got to an age when I was like very young.
Mm-hmm.
And I I don't really know what happened. It could have been minor. It could have been, I have no idea. But it was like it just a knowing of like something happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And it's so interesting that you say that because I remember when I was at Rhythmia back in November of 2019, and we would always have integration classes the next day, and almost everybody would show because that particular trip, it was an invite only private group with all friends of Jack Canfield. And he's the guy from The Secret and Chicken Soup for the Soul author. And so he created this global community called Transformation Leadership Council, TLC. And it's got like nothing but like people from The Secret, right? Or like,
mhm,
you know, I don't even know. Like if I said names, you would know them. But bottom line is it was people like that, conscious, open, doing the work. And what was beautiful is that no matter how much work you've done, 80% of the people in the integration classes after our ceremonies were sharing that they were discovering what you discovered. And
mhm,
it's very, very common. And so then the main facilitator was saying that, yeah, it's usually 7 to 8 out of 10 people that come through the doors of Rhythmia that remember something of sexual trauma when they were little. So on the one hand, it lets us know that, nobody's alone. I haven't had that experience yet,
mhm,
and I haven't had a knowing about that.
mhm,
I'm not saying it's not there. I just haven't
mhm.
come across that yet.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about trauma. It can be as benign as, I'm going to say something that I've never shared. I remember, and it's been traumatic for me. I can laugh about it now because we're all just humans and
Mhm,
having this soul experience, or whatever the phrase is.
mhm,
No, soul's having human experience.
mhm,
But I remember being about 11 or 12. So my body's changing and I'm very conscious of it. And I'm not comfortable at all with this. But my dad takes me and my sister and my younger brother to a nude beach.
mhm.
And my dad was like, in his 20s and the 70s, like this is like no big deal to him. He's not at
Normal.
all
Yeah.
putting it together that it might be uncomfortable for his adolescent daughters. And that's not a judgment on my dad, but some days I'm in hardcore judgment about it still.
Mhm,
But whatever, he really just didn't think there was anything wrong with this. But so here he is, we're at the beach, he's naked. We're like in our bathing suits, in our sleeping bags, because I think the whole thing is completely
mhm,
uncomfortable for me. And my dad's drinking beers. And so that's not a good thing, nor is it a great memory. And he's talking to a woman who's also naked, and she's sitting with us for hours.
mhm,
And I feel like he's flirting with her, but he's married to my mom. And that might not have been accurate in my perception, but all I know is that traumatized me.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, I've
Yeah.
learned from a lot of trauma experts that you could have a 6-month-old baby that believes that they are unlovable and have been abandoned by everybody in their life because their parent at 6 months old was trying to sleep train their 6-month-old baby.
Right.
and not coming for them when they were crying in the crib to try to get them to soothe themselves back to sleep. But the baby doesn't know that. So the baby lives with this imprint for the rest of its life that it's somehow unlovable and has been abandoned. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
So it's
Totally.
just an interesting thing to be alive and to want to be self responsible for our own nervous system and for our own present moment, which is where our power is, and to let go of any of the stories that no longer serve us. I mean, that is what this time really represents.
I think that's a key thing. And, we've done a lot to get there, but what are like some things? Because, like, you actually even said that, like, present moment, like being, because I think we were talking about something we had our podcast class. And was that what we were talking about? And then I was like, and you brought it back to being in the present moment and just, because all we have is this moment now, but we're like thinking about like
Mhm.
what I have to do later, what I'm going to be doing for a job down the road or our bills or whatever. And it's like being in the moment of like how, I mean, and it's a practice, but like how, how to like be in that moment. Like, and I feel like it's like emanating off of you, like, because I like like I told you, there was like a shift and just like a beauty and like a dance almost that you have like experience, because I've been watching your journey as well.
Mm.
What do you like? How do you, can you put that into words of like being in the moment?
I think I can. I think that so many of us are afraid to feel what's in the moment. So we
Mm-hmm.
numb and we anesthetize and we suppress, oppress, and distract from feeling in the present moment. And the only reason that I believe we are afraid to feel what's in the present moment is because we're not in the present moment. We're trying to forecast to a future that doesn't exist, nor are we guaranteed. And and so that's too uncomfortable for most of our nervous systems,
Mm-hmm.
and just to like, oh, actually life only happens right here and right now. So if I can be with whatever is uncomfortable, and I can be in the mess, I can be in the question, I can be in the unknown, and if there's anything that I can offer, it's to remain really curious. Just stay
Mm-hmm.
curious. Like that has become like a moral compass and like my top value in life. It's like, can I just stay really curious? I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know how this is going to play itself out. And I also am no longer going to shame myself that I should know how to do this or should have figured this out by now. I'm just going to allow myself to be in the present moment. And then the extra credit comes a little bit later once you've practiced that a little bit. You always can get the gateway, by the way, with deep breaths, just because that allows you to get
Mm-hmm.
back to the moment,
Mm-hmm.
is loving whatever is showing up. So you're not trying to numb it away. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, shit, I got some rage coming through me right now. Like, wow, I feel like such a horrible person because I didn't know this amount of rage was in me. It's
Mm-hmm.
in everyone. We're all trying to suppress our
Right.
rage and pretend like we're all so joyful and happy all the time. But we can't actually get to that joy vibration, which is the innate essence of who we are, unless we can first be with all that is.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the breath, right? Because sometimes it's so effing uncomfortable to be with it. Because that's really been my practice lately, is like not judging and like trying to be with it and just kind of breathe and be in my body, because I can like
Yeah.
just, yeah, just
Well,
escape.
we're all just spiraling out into the future. And then right now, especially for so many of us on this awakening journey that's happening worldwide. So the good news is we're not alone. There's a beautiful vibration, right? And a
Yeah.
frequency of like we're in this together. And a lot of us feel like we're going crazy right now because there's no blueprint, there's no manual for this time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all trying to figure out this new earth collectively but individually, and yet some of us are in community, some of us aren't. We have old identities and communities that we once belonged in, and now we're like, I'm not sure where I belong. So it's a
Yeah.
wild time. But at the core of who we are a sovereign being. We are a beautiful emanation of all that is, which is God. It's love, it's light, and we're not disconnected from all of the divine realm. That's just the truth, right? If we
Right.
subscribe to this at all, and you don't have to be spiritual or religious, just to know that everything is interconnected, that we are not this physical vessel. And so when we know that, we can come back to this truth of who we are, which is sovereign. And that's our personal power. And we have everything within us to face, feel, embrace, and be with anything along our path. But we have been so programmed and conditioned to think that we can't handle it. So we just comply, we do the right thing, we keep our mouth closed, we don't speak up. But you're not here for
Yeah.
that. And I'm not here for that. And the fact that we're
Yeah.
on this awakening journey, that's old 3D. It's not going to cut it anymore. You can't go back.
Yeah.
So here you are, you got a podcast and you're speaking
Yeah.
truth and sharing things here that you never have before. Because when we step into our personal power, we open up our throat chakra. And the more that we speak truth, even when it feels scary, the more that we liberate others to speak more truth too. And this is beautiful for us to do this together.
Yeah, thank you. No wonder why I was really nervous because I mean, there's things that like we talked about today that I like probably, I always, and actually talking about one of, like a thing that, like a download that I've gotten in one of my journeys is I'm the quiet warrior. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like we're all warriors here and being in this, you
Mhm.
know, like you talk about a soul being in like our body, it's like our vessel, but we're all like warriors here. And I'm the quiet warrior. And so it's like, I don't really like speak up. So it's kind of ironic that I have a podcast. So of course, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all out. Like, don't talk to like the people in my community, but let me just like talk to
Yeah, my
everyone.
guess is, and let me know if I'm accurate here, and just remain curious about this instead of just assuming an answer.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is there's nothing quiet about your warrior.
Okay.
You're a light warrior, but you've been conditioned and programmed to be quiet and
Mm-hmm.
to not trust your voice and your power. And so you've given it ego, not you, ego that's just feels separate from God, let's just call it, from love, from consciousness. It's come in and said, "Oh, Stephanie, you're the quiet warrior." When in fact, no one who is a quiet warrior starts a podcast. Accurate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're literally finding your power on your
Mm-hmm.
podcast. And by the way, I had the same thing happen to me.
Yeah.
Like my podcast, the last 10 months, like I have found what I'm here on the planet for. And it was only from me just getting on the mic every single week and just speaking truth. And let me offer something else that may be helpful for you or any of your listeners, because a lot of people get really triggered by the term be vulnerable or courageous or brave.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like a really loaded word for so many people. It's like, oh my God, that's just heavy. Instead, I say, what if you're just honest? Just be honest. Like you were just honest. It wasn't difficult to be honest, but it feels a little more challenging to be brave or to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Is that land for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. I mean, even I always get mixed up with authenticity as well. Like, because I mean, honesty could be authenticity, but I always feel like there's something hidden in the authenticity. Does that
Mhm,
make sense?
mhm.
Like, we're being authentic in this moment, but there's always like, you know, another layer that or something gets revealed. It's, it's really, it is kind of comical when you kind of can step back at all the like different dynamics that go on, and where even like this conversation or the conversation with somebody else or what's going on, it's just kind of funny, how we are with each other, how like it's a reflection, like how you are and how I am is a reflection back to me, and then there's like the ego at
Yes,
play. There's just like a lot of dynamics going on.
it's so true. And I was looking for a book that has been my Bible these past 10 months, specifically last year in the fall, when I hopped back on my mic of the Fire and Soul podcast for the first time in 3 months. I was so inconsistent. I didn't know how to share. I was having this awakening experience. I felt like
Oh,
I was going through a nervous breakdown. I didn't know how to get on the mic. I was like, what would I even talk about? I don't even know how to talk right now.
wait, through your awakening, you
Yeah.
stopped for 3 months?
Oh yeah, I
Oh
took
wow.
actually almost 4 full months off last
Oh
year in
wow.
21.
Okay.
So in February of 21 is when I went down what I call the red pill rabbit hole, only because I
Mhm.
didn't have any other reference. So it seemed like it was red pill, conservative, Republican. Turns out that's not what it was. It's just what it was called at the time, or
Mhm.
maybe I called it that because I
Mhm.
was so to the left in my politics and ideology and my identity around being a progressive liberal that was so proud to be woke, right? But I didn't know that I
Mhm.
was woke until I learned
Mhm.
later that, like, oh, wait. um, and I'm not judging or shaming any of that. Most people that are in that don't know they're in it. They think it's the right thing and they think it's the honest thing and they think it's the best thing to be doing. So when I woke up, it was like, oh, it looked like it was a bunch of like red states and conservatives. I was like, wait, what? Like that didn't necessarily align, but so I found my way in the interim. But yeah, just took a full month off in the spring of last year. And then by the summer, I was just in it and deconstructing everything about my life, including where I lived in Santa Monica and my home and my
Mhm.
friends and every TV platform, news media that I was, that I plugged into for 20 years, like CNN. I trusted CNN like it was gospel. It never
Right.
even came into my mind that that might not be what it says it is, right?
Right.
Like so many people still believe that. And that might be perfect for their soul's journey. So I'm not judging that, FYI. And so, yeah, there was almost 4 months. And so when I hopped back on the mic, I was super honest about it. And I just let it reveal itself over time. Um, and then the more that I just was with it and shared about being in it and knew that it was messy. And by the way, Stephanie, there were so many times when I would have a podcast get released and I would, for the next 24 hours, just want to die that I put it up. Just
Wait,
want to die.
recently or like when you started?
Recently,
Okay.
I'm just good with
Yeah.
whatever, which is bananas because
Yeah.
I am so honest now.
Yeah.
But what I want to share about this book that I read, so I found this woman named Ruby Fremont. She lives in Texas. She's from LA, and she has a very similar story to me. She was a coach and a trainer, and was very much to the left, and sort of the politics and in deeply to the self development space, which also is part of very much that woke mentality for the
Mhm.
most part. And she wrote a book called Potent Leadership. And what the book speaks to is taking off the mask and revealing the real you. And so, as I read the book at first, I was like, oh, I don't wear a mask. I'm authentic. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
authentic. And then I was like, holy shit. When she gave examples of mask on, mask off, especially for how we show up in social media, and then I put that, like, I gave it the perspective of my podcast. I'm like, okay, I get it. I get it. This, even thinking about what you're going to share is
Yeah.
mask on. Or if you're sharing to generate buzz or to generate metrics and engagement, it's mask on. When you're no longer thinking about what you're sharing and you're simply sharing because you know it's the medicine you have been called to serve, you are finally in your truth. But it takes practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I admire it so much. And I mean, like, yeah, it's a journey, and I'm on the path as well. I
Yes,
can't
you
say
are.
that. Like, I feel super, I always like, I'm a authentic, pure person, but like, yeah, I definitely have, I can call myself out on like, yeah, I plan my Instagram post or, you know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I, work, it feels a little bit vulnerable to go in and like have these conversations with people in a corporate setting, and I'm like very quirky, but I feel like, yeah, it doesn't really feel that safe to go do that yet.
I hear you. It's kind of funny that you bring this up because for the last few years, all of my coaching and training programs have all been very business with a tangible ROI. Like, if you do this, then you're going to get that. And all of it was true. Like, I had frameworks and formulas and blueprints to offer that took me 10 years to develop, and they were solid. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people made a lot of money going through my programs and were very, very happy. And I mean, I think to date, some of my students have generated over $20 million in revenue. Like, it's serious business.
Yeah.
And I'm going through this awakening journey. And I'm like, the first offer that I put out is this vague, nebulous, no ROI, come to awaken your highest vibration, create your most authentic life. And I'm like, what is this? You know what I
This
mean?
is your new one, right? Your
Yeah.
soul ceremonies that you just
Yeah.
started this week.
Yes.
So are you not doing your, because I heard on your one of your podcasts, are you no longer coaching?
Well, so
Your
I don't really know what to call myself right
yeah.
now. And this is another thing that Ruby Freeman's book taught me. It was like, you are not your Instagram bio. Like,
Yeah.
be clear on that. So, literally, my Instagram bio doesn't even say who I am or what I do, which is the antithesis of what I used to teach.
Yeah.
That would help so many people build their impact online. And so it literally says, I am Michelle. It's like,
I
you know,
know.
I can't call myself a coach or a trainer. I don't really know what to call myself because nothing feels like it really represents where I am. But
Mm,
what I wanted to share about that briefly about Soul Circle and me opening
mm-hmm.
that up is here I was thinking like this is bananas. Like, okay, if 8 people show up, I'm going to be very blessed because I don't even know what this program is promising. Like, they're like, what is this? Because it was so different, but it was so resonant with
Yeah.
my journey and what I want to help people with, which is a bridge from my heart to theirs, and to awaken to all this love and this joy and this fucking freedom that I feel every day. And I was like, if I can just break down what's been working and what helped me deepen into this connection with myself and source and nature, I know I can help so many people be
Totally.
happy, right?
Yeah.
And that will create their most authentic life. Well, I'm going to say something right now. My Soul Circle launch was my highest grossing revenue mastermind launch to date.
Wow. Congratulations. And when you said that, like because your podcast now, like you're hitting like record numbers.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, right, like as soon as you maybe let go of the numbers and the metrics that you want to hit, that also is limiting. That when you can let go and let it be, it can
Yeah.
be
And the
whatever.
reason I shared all of that was not to like, oh, look at you, because believe me, I didn't know what was going to happen. I was like, again, if I get 8 people,
Yeah.
I'll be blessed because I'm on the path that's pulling me forward. But you
Mm-hmm.
were talking about this really weird conundrum of like being a corporate girl and having a podcast. And what it spawned in me was when I used to teach all these business courses, this stuff that we're talking about here was always at the heart of everything I shared.
Yeah.
You're like, you've always been quirky. Like, have you been quirky or is that just your authenticity? Right.
Yeah.
And so, and then I remember thinking, like, oh man, I'm going to lose all my followers. Like, they know me as like the fancy coach who hobnobs with Tony Robbins and Jack Canfield and all these people and done all these beautiful collaborations and been on these huge stages with Dave Asprey, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that ain't my world anymore. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
and what are they going to think? And I was like, you know what? I have to trust what's pulling me forward. And so that's what you're doing. Like you're just going to shed and shed and shed and shed. And you are going to watch the people be magnetized to your message because, yeah, my podcast died by 90%. I was so inconsistent. They were like, if she's not going to show up for me, I'm not going to show up for her. So I lost 90% of my listeners by August of last year. And now we've almost recouped everyone. Well, not everyone, new people, completely new audience. There's still people like you that were around and have been around, but like it's grown so much. And it's all people who are on this awakening journey and we're
Mm-hmm.
evolving together. So what am I really trying to say? The archangels promise that when you are doing this work and you are speaking about the light, from the light, for humanity, right? An elevation conversation, an inclusive, united conversation, you are going to be deeply blessed beyond measure. So it's time for us to step into our power and to use our voice and to be honest and just to trust that we're going to be supported and guided and protected on our journey.
Yeah, even if, like, I want to add to that, even if it looks how you think it shouldn't look.
We'll guarantee you it's going to look that
Yeah.
way because that's all ego.
Yeah. Well, even if, like, if what we consider like shit hits the fan and like you lose 90% of your
Very.
audience, that is actually always up an opportunity, or you know what I mean? That's a gift too. You know what I mean? It's like it's all a gift, I see, even though it's sometimes hard in the moment
It was
when
hard in the moment. Not only was that hard in the moment, and I was legit in the fetal position crying to my mom as a grown ass woman. like,
Yeah.
and asking her to please hold me because I didn't know if I would ever make another dollar in my life.
Well, and that was, I had listened to that episode and I had no idea that actually went on. And like, I felt, I was like, oh, I wish like I could be there for her. Cause you said you had like a very close knit of people who went through that experience with you. But like, yeah, you mentioned like you left your home in Santa Monica to move to you don't know where. And then your business, like your podcast, like everything that you had known and built, like kind of came
It was a
to,
complete deconstruction.
yeah.
But look at how beautiful. I want to cry because I'm so grateful. 10 months later, it's like it's beyond my dreams.
Yeah.
And then even in January, my podcast producer and business partner and dear friend, she canceled me because of the kind of content that I was sharing.
Oh.
And so there
Uh-huh.
was that whole journey of like who she had been my producer since day one. I never knew
Yeah.
anyone else. And I was just like, oh my, I literally felt paralyzed in fear for a couple of days. And then I finally just gave it to God. I remember it was winter, it was late January here in LA, and I was under the full moon night after night after night. And I just kept saying, I surrender. I surrender. I have
Yeah.
been taken on this path for a reason, and I'm going to trust in this. Seeds are
Oh,
planted. It's
yeah.
winter. I don't know what's going to come. And then I found Greta, and Greta
Yeah.
has been now my new editor. And I'll tell you, this is why the God is so good. The vibration and the energy around a team producing my podcast that wasn't in alignment with my content, it was stifling it. And the
Mm-hmm.
moment that Greta got her, granted, the podcast had started to grow,
Mm-hmm.
but as soon as I shifted and I was brave and I got resourceful and I was like, I'm not stopping, because I was basically given the option of like, you can stop or we're going to have to cancel you. And I was like, I can't stop. This is literally what I was born for. This time right now, I have to continue to bring the love and light to those who need it, because we're in this journey around the world and so many people feel alone and isolated, like they're the only
Right.
ones going through it. And so I knew I couldn't stop. It was a purpose. And then the podcast just exploded,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like sometimes you have to get to that like what we would call bottom, or what's
Yeah.
not, doesn't look right in order. And that's like freaking uncomfortable. And you're like, what next? Because I've been building it like this, that you have to like deviate and pivot. And going
Yes.
back full circle to like letting go of like when you went to your first journey at Rhythmia, it's like kind of flashing like and I do the same thing. Like I build, like I have to hit this goal, I have to get here, and I'm like 30, or I'm like 41, I should be like here. But it really doesn't matter. It's
Mm-mm.
like let go of all those, all made up
It's
stuff.
all made up. It's
Yeah.
all from the matrix. It's all
Yeah.
programming,
Yeah.
and no wonder there's so much obesity and alcoholism and
Yeah.
drug abuse and mental illness. It's no one can ever measure up to the
Yeah.
latest, milestone of what you're supposed to be, being married by a certain age, having children, or you can never know true unconditional love, or owning your house by 34 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, show me any of those people that are, for the most part, really happy on the inside,
Yeah.
really happy with who they are, and that they have this sense of who they are. And I'm, by the way, not saying that I got it all figured out, and I'm certainly not perfect. The thing about being on an awakening journey, when you really get into it, is you realize you're gonna continue to awaken your entire life,
Yeah.
shedding the layers and anything that weighs you down and that tells you that you're not good enough, and that it's in that fear matrix. And and then you're like, oh wait, all that exists is this moment. And so if I can take care of this moment and be fully present and love myself and accept myself, and if I can build on that moment by moment, my life is going to be like one miracle after another.
Yeah. It's really awesome. And I know like we're using the example of a podcast and business, but I think it really can relate to anybody, to anything they're up against or wanting to let go of. I really think it can pertain to anything.
1,000%. No
Yeah.
matter what anyone is up against, it's all an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's a tool that I could leave anyone with, it's like, well, there's a couple things, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things that really
I want to
helped me.
respect your time too.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap in a couple
Okay.
minutes. But one of the things that really helped me, and I realized this is really extreme and not everyone's going to go for it or would be willing to do it, but I unplugged 100% from TV, Netflix, and Apple TV and all mainstream media. Like, because all that's frequency of
Yeah.
fear, and it's just being programmed and indoctrinated, and it's keeping us very low vibration.
Yeah.
And so I literally went cold turkey back in August, and I haven't turned on the TV since. I cut Netflix about 6.5 months ago. Occasionally now I'll buy or rent a movie on Amazon. Avatar, I've probably watched 11 times over the past many months. It's my number one favorite film.
It's
And it's so good. And so, but like I got out of the vibration of all that. And then I put myself consciously and deliberately into Mother Nature, hikes, walks, under trees, marveling at plants, at birds, at butterflies, like, and that showed me a different frequency. And that's possible for anyone, no matter what you're currently up against. It's like unplug from the fear, panic, anxiety matrix, plug in consciously into what nourishes you, because not all of us can go right into meditating for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's not easy for all of us, but we can go take a walk and just literally be present on the walk, marvel at how you can see divinity personified everywhere.
Right.
And then you'll see that you're not alone. You're interconnected with all sentient beings and all things on Mother Gaia, which is an archangel.
Right.
It's a
That's
beautiful,
really
beautiful
profound. I also want to add, which was really amazing that you did too, is you cut out all alcohol.
I did. Yeah.
And all like numbing substances, which I haven't gotten to the Netflix one. I'm almost there. Like I've cut out certain things, and I'm just, there is still, I have to admit, I still catch that Netflix. Like
a lot of people do. And
I want to though.
Yeah, exactly. It's nothing to shame or judge, but a girlfriend of mine who actually joined Soul Circle, my new mastermind, she's living in the UK, and she was like, Michelle, wait, she's like, I battle it. And I was like, oh my God. And it reminded me of how I would literally, when I was first learning to do this and like program myself consciously, I would like have the Netflix tab up on my laptop because, I got rid of the TV back in August. So I'm now just working off of a, laptop. I got the Netflix tab up, and I've got like a YouTube channel that I know is going to nourish my soul. And I'm like, it was like good, bad, which is not good or bad, but it was just like, and I told her, you know what it felt like? Effort to watch the YouTube. And it felt like, oh, no effort, be mindless.
Just, full on.
And then over time, I was like, oh, it doesn't feel like effort now to watch the stuff that nourishes my soul. But that was an evolution. It's kind of like when you first go to the gym or start yoga. It's so hard in the beginning. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, this feels so good. So it's all just a practice.
I love that. Thanks for that, because I have the same thing. You two are Netflix. But it feels like work, to sometimes do the.
That's YouTube. Exactly it. But, so we can give ourselves grace in those moments.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I see what this is.
Thank you so much. Gosh, thank you, because you've opened up a whole new avenue for me, and I'm sure on this day that it releases, I'm going to be like, oh no, what was I thinking? But I'm totally grateful, and thank you so much. I love you. And I
love you.
Thank you for all that you do for the world and being your bright light. Thank you.
Oh, Stephanie, thank you for having me on. I have a feeling that your community in this podcast, they're going to see a different version of you going forward. And just remember, like, this is what people want. This is what people are longing for. This is what they're craving. And the more that you do it, the more that you give them permission to drop their mask as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just know you're not a quiet warrior. You are a light warrior.
Thank you.